Being put into an asylum for the disabled in Australia's history was anyone considered to be a risk to society. Where children were considered to be uneducated, the parents were often told to put their children away to then get on with their own lives. This meant that many who were put away were not insane, but severely disabled. Some people with disability were able to get invalid pensions. This is likely to be those who are able to contribute to the economy. Much of the stigma of disabled persons have come from history. As far back as biblical times, those who had marked problems were shut out from society, and considerations and assumptions made that these people were evil, or that the gods had delivered them or their family punishment. However, in addition, these individuals were also given charity. In the Middle Ages, individuals who had any ailment were called by that disability: the blind, the paralysed, the debilitated, or the weak. Debilitation is the transitional word to disability, to what we know today. In all societies, people's expectations of normal have always been what the culture suggests. Sideshows and freaks of nature were where the world could get up close to what they did not understand. After the Second World War for Australia, some of the stigma for physical disability changed because many couldn't be institutionalised. Some government programs funded rehabilitation. In addition, because more people suffered from some form of disability, some social relaxation came of those who had a disability. The polio epidemic in Australia also assisted in the culture accepting physical disability. And although the social problems presented by those suffering from intellectual disability, many in society who were looking for social change started organisations to close institutions, arguing that their brothers and sisters, sons and daughters should be welcomed into the community. From a historical perspective, however, the bulk of legislation was unaware of definitions within specific disabilities, and with the Lunacy Act 1871 to 1903, there was no debate before the bill was passed into law. Those with epilepsy had no definition against intellectual disability and often would be committed as a lunatic in the same category as intellectual disability. The eugenics movement saw those with disability as weak and promiscuous, and in the 1920s, the Parliament was set on sterilising those in asylums without their consent. Asylums in this mindset were to protect the defectives from harm, for their own protection. Some of those with intellectual disabilities were used as cheap labour to assist those with serious conditions, as the government at the time seen this as useful and financially viable to segregate the lunatic from the feeble-minded people. In November 1936, Joseph O'Sullivan was convicted of murder of his son, aged 3 years and 9 months. In summary, this man murdered his son with intellectual disability. In response to the murder charge, he started a petition which gained public sympathy, getting him off the hanging charge. In the late 50s, social reform and funding allowed 400 people, all children, mental defectives and senile persons, not primarily admitted for mental disease, that they should be taken out of the hospital. This was part of the state's grants Mental Health Institutions Act 1955, of which much of the public were confused about where the funding came from. International Year of the Disabled Persons in 1981 brought the needs and rights of those with disabilities to the wider community. This led to legislation creating the Authority for the Intellectually Handicapped and was passed by the West Australian Parliament some 4 years later. By 1986, the Disability Rights Advocacy movement was recognised and funding provided under the Disability Services Act of 1986. And with this, much activism, advanced focus for disability and self-determination through hostels, nursing homes and community housing. By 2008, the United Nations Convention for the Rights of the Persons with Disabilities is the most recent major advancement of the Australian disability rights movement and in the lives of the people with disability. In 2013, the National Disability Scheme was created,